this is one of my things, like you don't get taught in your whole education how to do, in my opinion, the main life skills that you need, such as how do you run a business, how do you do accounts, what is a credit score, all of this stuff. And I'd always had an interest in cameras when I was a kid. I mean, you're still young, aren't you? You don't quite know what you want to do, and there's a large amount of people that just go there for the uni experience. We've come into podcasts only the start of this year because, I mean, I think anyone can see how podcasts have gone from 0 to 100 in the last couple of years. We've got a pre-made space that looks very attractive. They walk into the room, all the cameras are already set up, they just sit down, they do what we're doing now, they have a chat, they leave, everything else is done for them. And again, it's the same subscription model.
Hi everyone, you're listening to the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know I started this podcast because over the years I've had hundreds of the most inspiring conversations of my life with small business owners, and they really helped me grow and scale my own business and get my mindset right even when times were really tough. I wanted to capture those conversations and make them available to other small business owners who are following in my footsteps, and I've just got a small request. If you enjoy this episode, if you find it really inspiring, if you find it helps you in your own business, then please just like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The more subscribers we get, the more we can invest in making the podcast better. So enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, it's Nishi here. You're listening to the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Wardle from Eldraw Creative Media. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and for the audience, if you could tell us what you do.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Chris Wardle, director of Eldraw Creative Media Limited. Primarily, we're a video production agency, slight crossover with content creation, podcasting, basically anything video and photography related, which obviously very prevalent at the minute to have high quality content to publish online for social media and obviously website content.
That's really cool. And I think earlier when we were talking, so you've got Eldraw Creative Media, and what's your other brand that you mainly work on?
I've got a secondary brand called Lifestyle Visuals, which is primarily, solely focused at like luxury weddings, so high-end weddings. So I separated to two brands because I didn't want a crossover of it. I didn't want someone landing on the website and thinking, well, you do everything. I wanted to kind of have a business brand and a wedding brand. But Eldraw is definitely kind of the forefront, the main brand, kind of my original and baby brand, and the wedding is kind of almost a secondary, although it's coming up on the level in terms of how they're kind of performing with each other. So
yeah, amazing. And I mean, Eldraw's been around for a little while, hasn't it? Because I remember I met you probably about just under 9 years ago when we first went to the business club together, we were networking. It
would be 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, such a long time actually. My business is almost about 10 years old. Yours must be about 10 years old now.
Yeah, I think probably around similar time, because I kind of remember you were sort of new, fresh out the box, I think, working in your bedroom possibly still.
The box room. Yeah.
And I was much the same. I had my dad helping me a little bit, so kind of using an office free of charge kind of gave me a bit of a leg up. That's how we got started.
Oh, amazing. And you know what, before we start unpicking what you do with Eldraw and where you want to take it, if you could help me understand and the audience understand, like, how did you get from like education into the world of work?
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, my education journey is pretty straightforward, fairly traditional, I'd say, apart from starting up on my own. So I went to college, Stanford College. I should probably rewind slightly. I did completely fail my A-levels. So I started to do A-levels at my school, like as sixth form. So I completed the first stage, is it A and then AS? Is that right?
The other way, yeah.
Okay, so I did the first year, and basically I was at the age, I was 17, just got a car, other distractions. I completely just was not interested in education. So I failed AS level, basically. I couldn't go to the secondary year. And at that point, it's kind of, well, what do I do? Maybe this isn't the right environment for me. So then looked at going to college instead. And and that was what I needed basically to get away from the school environment, because it was the same school I'd been at for the last 3-4 years before that. So I went to Stanford College and did, I think it was a HND, Higher National Diploma in Multimedia Studies. So that was like a hybrid course between a little bit of graphic design, a little bit of photography, and a little bit of video, and in some degree a bit of sort of animation, like stop motion animation. So I was kind of advised by family and mainly my dad to do that course, because initially when I was kind of 13 plus, I was that kid that did Photoshop all day long. Yeah. You know, it was in the Bebo days where you could customize I think they were called skins, where everyone could have their banners or you could put music and you could have whatever graphics you wanted. I was always that guy that people messaged, can you make me a skin for Bebo?
What is Bebo?
Do you not remember Bebo?
I don't think I do.
It was a social media network just before MySpace, I think.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
So, or the other way around, can't quite remember. I think it went Bebo, MySpace, Facebook, if I remember. Same with MySpace, though. You could customize the skins in MySpace too.
I don't remember Bebo, but
yeah,
no, that sounds...
I don't think it lasted too long, but they were planning to revive it a few years back, but I don't think it ever got off the ground. But anyway,
I guess things die for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I had graphic design background. I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer, and my dad, well, very wisely as it happens, advised me potentially to broaden my horizons a bit, which is why I went into doing the HND, where it was, yes, it had a bit of design, but it also had photography and video. And I'd always had an interest in cameras when I was a kid. I remember kind of having like a 2 megapixel Olympus camera for one birthday. I don't know how old I was, maybe 12, 11 or something. So I always had an interest in photography as well. So that course made sense. Long story short, did very well on the course. It was a 2-year course. I got a distinction or triple distinction, basically the highest mark you can get on that course, which I wasn't really expecting to get. And then that basically allowed me to choose if I wanted to go to uni. It was at that point, I can't remember the exact year, probably 2012 I finished, so probably 2009. That was around the point where we'd kind of just come out of a recession. There was no apprenticeships. You couldn't get an apprenticeship to save your life. That's the direction I would have gone to if I could, but that wasn't an option. So I ended up going to uni, but I just decided to commute to uni and go to Northampton. So I literally went to Northampton Uni just down the road. So I did a degree in media production.
Okay.
And a similar story with that, really. Got on really well with it. Very focused. Ended up finishing with the first degree. Again, wasn't expecting that at all, but ended up with the first. Made some good friends, and there was only a group of 3 or 4 of us that, in my opinion, took it seriously. There's a lot of people on my course that are doing absolutely nothing related. The same with most uni courses. There's only a handful of us that are actually still in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a degree in chemistry with management, so
yeah.
I guess I do the management bit now. But yeah, the chemistry bit's not particularly used. So yeah, I
mean, you're still young, aren't you? You don't quite know what you want to do, and there's a large amount of people that just go there for the uni experience, which I did to a degree, but I was still living at home with my mum, so I didn't really do that student halls.
Yeah.
Spending loads of money, getting drunk every night. That wasn't really me anyway. I kind of had my social life back at home, with friends from at home, like, because I was always into cars and stuff. I'd rather hang around in cars than go to the nightclubs, kind of thing.
Well, I had this conversation with Charlotte from starting off earlier today. Like, they're an apprentice recruitment agency we use, and like, whenever someone's done like a finance degree, we really struggle to employ them. Not like we're prejudiced or anything against it. It's just like, a lot of the time you get people coming to do an apprenticeship, and you ask the question, why would someone rather do a degree, spend all that money and not get any work experience in something they could just do as an apprenticeship at a time when there's many apprenticeships available.
Yeah.
And then what we then find is a lot of the time when we give those, like, you know, bring those finance degree people in for a work experience or something, they tend not to last because they just haven't been taught how to actually work. Or use their initiative. And then, but I guess, like, you know, I think graduates, and I'm making lots of generalizations here, but, like, you know, when I was at university, like, you know, people were told, like, the government was like, said, hey, go to university. That, you know, Tony Blair was trying to get half the people in the country to go to university. And that's what people did. Whereas now, so you ended up with some really good quality people going to university that could easily have just gone straight into apprenticeships.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think, yeah, it's just kind of odd why people are going to uni, racking up all that student debt, not getting the experience when they could easily just get that apprenticeship. But we've been struggling. Maybe it's just our skill set's not right to be able to deal with graduates, but it is right to be able to deal with apprentices. Maybe that's the way our business is set up. But what you say does make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to take an apprentice on maybe in future years, maybe even next year. I think, obviously, presumably they require a lot more hands-on time. Is
Liam, what does he do? Because you've got a member of your team already, haven't you?
Yeah, so Liam is a full-time member of staff, but he's in a senior videographer role, so he doesn't require sort of too much management, other than what you'd expect. I'm not having to teach him loads of stuff, whereas if you got an apprentice, you could assume that they don't really know anything.
Yeah, that's a lot of the time that can be a fair assumption.
But my degree, if I'm honest, it wasn't the best degree either, because it was at the time where it was the £3,500 a year. So there was limited funding. They barely had any equipment. And as soon as I left, they put the fees up to £9,000 a year or whatever it went up to. And then the uni kind of completely changed, and they had new studios and new camera gear. So we were kind of working with the bare bones in the first place. And to be honest, when I started the course, I felt like I didn't need to go to college, because it just recapped it all again anyway. Oh yeah. So I did kind of feel like I wasted the 2 years, or I could have just skipped to year 2 straight away. But I guess they've got to cater for everyone.
Chris, so you finished university, and how long were you there for? About 3 years?
Yes, a 3-year course. Yeah.
And then is that when you went and started your own business straight away?
Yeah, well, that's the part of my story that probably isn't so typical, because I've never had a proper job as such. I mean, I've always worked. I've always had work ethic. Like, I had a paper round since I was 12. I worked at a pub from 15 right the way through to probably, I don't exactly know, probably 22. So I still had a pub job for the first few years of Eldraw anyway. So I had 2 incomes, because obviously as you get going, you don't earn that much anyway. And I was very fortunate that my dad had just sold his finance business at quite a younger age, sort of early 50s, if even 50. So he wasn't ready to retire.
Is that Simon?
Yeah, Simon, yeah.
What kind of finance business was it?
So he specialised in finance for primarily optical equipment, so opticians and dentists, basically.
Excellent.
So he'd finance all the machinery, the refit, the refit of the practices. And yeah, he had a really successful business that he sold to a competitor in whatever year that was, probably similar time I left uni, so maybe 2012, 13. He wanted something to do, and I needed help. As this is one of my things, like, you don't get taught in your whole education how to do, in my opinion, the main life skills that you need, such as how do you run a business, how do you do accounts, what is a credit score, all of this stuff. You don't actually get taught that. Yeah. That's something that actually I'm quite passionate about to some degree, or at least find quite frustrating sometimes. So I didn't have a clue how to run a business. I left uni, I found some freelance work. I was working maybe 2 days a week for a production company in Toaster, who are still going, and I guess now are probably competitors as such, although we're not that close to each other. So I learned on the job as a freelancer in terms of how to do interviews, how to mic people up, a little bit about lighting and that kind of thing. Because believe it or not, we didn't really learn that much about that at uni, which you definitely should have, but we really didn't. So I learned on the job in terms of freelancing for a couple of production companies, but literally a few days here and there. And then we tried, between myself and my dad, tried to grow my own business. He's obviously comes from more of an old school background, which still applies now, like going to networking, going to breakfast meetings, all of that stuff. It was kind of pre-social media age anyway, or just sort of starting out. So we're a bit early to the video side of things. Content creation wasn't what it is now. So it was probably harder to get going. So yeah, we had a couple of first few years where it kind of ticked over, but it wasn't anything to shout about. But it's all about, in my opinion, and I still do it now, looking bigger than you are. I've always tried to look like our team is far bigger than it is. I mean, now the team is reasonably large, but it's still quite built around a freelance model, because that's just the nature of our industry anyway.
I think it depends who you're trying to sell to. Like if you're selling to the small one-man bands, they're going to want a similar size. But if you're trying to do more corporate work, then they're going to want to know that the project that they're relying on isn't completely linked to just you.
Well, that's what we wanted. We wanted, obviously, where the money is, by logic, is the bigger companies.
Yeah.
I've never really wanted to work for... I mean, most people in my industry, and there's nothing wrong with it, in fact, that's the right way to it, in my opinion, is they start off with all the local businesses. They do their barbershops, they do their gym videos, anything else, like small local businesses. But that's not who I generally would work with now, because those businesses, generally, they don't pay the bills. Like, they're a couple of £100 if you're lucky here and there. But if you're just starting out and you're trying to build a portfolio and you're maybe 18, 19, then that's absolutely fine. And I know people now of that age that they're absolutely flying by doing that, because they've come out of uni, if they've even been, or they've just self-taught themselves on YouTube, which, again, nothing wrong with that. Arguably, possibly the better idea than going to uni. They've come out and they've just thrown themselves out there and done a load of either very cheap or very free content, and now they've got a huge portfolio and can start to attract the bigger people. So that's the best way to do it. To some degree we did that, but I guess I had a helping hand with my dad, with a lot more of a business background, that we were always charging from the outset and not charging probably too little, whereas the average 18-year-old, I mean, don't get me wrong, I came from a pub job where I don't know what I was being paid, maybe £4 or £5 an hour. So if someone's offering you £200 for a video, you think that's fantastic, because you used to earn £80 for doing a 12-hour shift or whatever it was. But now I know there's way more value to it.
And also the overheads in business, they're
exactly,
quite substantial.
Exactly.
I think, I mean, you're definitely in an industry that's growing, really, aren't you, though? Because I was reading a statistic the other day, like, what was it? LinkedIn's growing by about, 80 million subscribers a month? I can't remember where I read that. But also it said like 5% of LinkedIn users are actually creating content. So 95% of LinkedIn users aren't creating content at the moment. But
so what are they doing? Just scrolling, looking at
yeah, they're
lurkers.
Okay, that's what I call them, lurkers. No, but there's But yeah, sorry, I don't know if that's a derogatory word. I didn't mean it like that, not in a creepy way. But they're just people that are watching other people's content, consuming content, but not creating their own. But that's fine as well. You know, not everyone needs to create the content, but the money is in creating content.
Well, as long as they're buying from whoever is making the content, then it's worth them being there. But yeah, that in theory means there's a huge market for people who need to create content.
Yeah, I mean, especially like, you know, and LinkedIn's clamped down on being able to just put a picture of your cat and then a funny like speech bubble.
Yeah.
It's getting more businessy. So, you know, people are looking for high quality content. And it's promoting high quality content. So I can imagine, but then the other side of it is, are there more people doing what you do, or the same, or less?
Well, we've always had that battle, even as long as I can remember, between is it fine to film it yourself, like DIY jobs, or should everyone have professional content and be spending thousands and thousands of pounds on having high-end production? And I can never say that there's anything wrong with creating your own content, because there's absolutely not. And in a lot of platforms, you're kind of rewarded, especially TikTok now. I know TikTok's pretty new in general terms, but professional content on TikTok doesn't do well. They want it, the algorithms like self-shot stuff, because that's just the nature of that app. And same with LinkedIn, there's a hell of a lot of self-shot stuff, purely because of the amount of content you need to succeed and post regularly. Unless you've got like an outrageous marketing budget, you just can't do everything professionally. Unless you start to go, which is the direction we're taking the business, having a small monthly retainer where someone does create content for you, but you shoot it in batch rather than trying to shoot it.
Yeah, create, or like with this podcast, I guess. I mean, for us, we ended up with too much content. Like we have to have a meeting and then figure out what we're going to prioritize in terms of LinkedIn, because you can't put loads of stuff on LinkedIn anymore. It's like, you know, they're really rationing how much exposure they're going to give you. Like the days where you could just have 10 posts a week are gone. You just got to have like 4 or 5 really good ones. But I mean, you know, I think Christina Robinson, she mentioned it when she was on this podcast. It's like, you know, create that one marketing asset and then keep reusing it and breaking it down into lots of smaller ones. So I guess the podcast for us is a marketing asset, but then we break it down into smaller things like shorts and clips. But then on top of that, we've got the videos that I do, like, you know, just with the camera and the mics and but actually, I guess for full disclosure here is you support us with a lot of our videos, so this podcast is going to be edited by your team.
But that's a great example though, because you've obviously realized it doesn't make financial sense to get a film crew in here every week to film your podcast. It's better for you to invest in the kit yourself, and in all fairness, you've been doing that, making content as long as I remember anyway, so you've obviously got an interest. Not everyone's actually got the talent or ability or even the want to make content in the first place, so you've sort of expanded your capabilities yourself anyway, and now you're at like quite a medium to high level of production in-house, whereas what I was talking about was more kind of mobile phones, bad lighting,
you know what,
bad sound.
I'm just trying to think. The first video I ever did is still on YouTube.
Okay.
That was like probably 9 years ago. I don't have we might have so I'm looking at Ellie like should have the answer, but I don't know. I think we've unlisted it, but you know what, I'm tempted to relist it as a public video, because I think, you know, a lot of people, if they're watching what we're doing now and they're thinking it's inaccessible,
well, it'd be a great bit of content to now. Why don't you make a piece of content that reviews your very first video? That's a piece of content. And it would probably do well on LinkedIn potentially.
I did it in our spare room on a sofa, which is now our nursery. The sofa's still there, although covered in lots of baby puke, which we cleaned up, but the stains are there. All right, anyway, but the point being is, but yeah, it was just I never liked filming videos. It was just it was just one of those things. Like, when I started the business, I made a commitment. I'm going to be whoever this business needs me to be.
But you were a very early adopter to it. You obviously saw the personal brand thing becoming very important, which it did.
Yeah, but in hindsight, I don't think those videos were helping my personal brand. I look like a 5-year-old that just read a book about tax. Maybe, but although I'm quite harsh on myself, I guess, quite self-critical in that. But it was a starting point. One thing I did realise was every video got better.
Yeah.
If only marginally, and then suddenly I got to a point where people were like, "Hey, your videos look really good." And I'm like, "Thank you, yeah." And but other people told me that. I never came to the realization myself.
Yeah.
But now looking back at my first videos, yeah, it's cringy, but it's important to understand.
And now look, you've got, what have you got? Maybe a 10-year history of pushing content online. You must quite strongly dominate online in your niche in this area. Surely.
I would say that, yeah. I mean, it helps that our solution doesn't have any direct competitors, although what doesn't help is no one really knows what our solution is because it's a category of one, essentially. So we have to do a lot of education around, why is having a financial model for your business important? Why is cash flow planning for a small business important? But that's a separate challenge. Every business has its challenges. Some people in a well-developed industry, they've got competitors. Sometimes if you're not in so much of a well-developed industry, you've got to put the effort into not beating competitors, but developing the industry.
Yeah.
But it's quite good. I think me and Ellie, we were quite nervous having you on today. We knew you'd have an amazing story to tell, but it was just you're the person that helped us set up the whole studio. So and then 3 months on or 4 months on, you come back in and we're like, are we doing it all right?
That's part of it. And again, that's probably is another direction of the business and I've thought this for a long time, we can offer consultation to help people do it themselves, but make sure they're doing it the best that they can, if that makes sense. So for example, the podcast, we've come into podcasts only the start of this year because naturally, I think anyone can see how podcasts have gone from 0 to 100 in the last couple of years. There's podcasts everywhere you look and in all kinds of niches. And that's the direction I've took the business this year as well, is we've opened our podcast space in Stamford. So we've got a pre-made space that looks very attractive. We've got a nice table. We've got the same mic stands as this, because this is a kit that we advise you to buy anyway. We've got a TV where they can put their brand in, and then we've got coloured LED lights behind them, which could be changed to their brand colours. So I developed that space. So obviously it's slightly restrictive because it only really works for clients in the sort of Stamford, Peterborough area, purely due to travel time, really. Because you probably wouldn't want to drive an hour to sit in the studio, which is why you took this route and asked for the advice to do it in-house, and then you send us the files and we edit it, which also works. And
I guess it's more scalable, isn't it, for you? Because in one direction, you're just trying to get everyone around Stamford, but then now really you can use anyone within travelling distance for you, really.
Yeah, exactly. Or clients with sort of a lot more marketing budget to hand, like a much larger firm, maybe they will pay us to go out to their site and film 4 or 5 episodes in a day, and then that's their month of content or podcast content done.
Yeah, I
which
guess,
is the kind of the third option for what we offer.
I'm trying to think about filming 5 of these in a day. I think
they're
I'd be
quite
dead
intense,
afterwards.
Yeah.
I do know what you mean. But what I found is we've got a small marketing team in our business, and it wasn't them learning the basics of camera setup. I guess they don't have to do a degree in it, to just understand the basics and some confines. And especially if you're the studio is a controlled environment, really, isn't it? Because the lighting's pretty much always the same. We put the lights in the same place.
Yeah.
We've got the lights in the same place above. We've got little bits of tape on the floor telling us where to put the table.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a good facility that a lot of people could set up, if assuming they've got the space. But yeah, it's about the consistency. So every time you go on your channel, all your videos look the same. Or anyone that is filming in our studio, if they've got a podcast brand, that all their videos are consistent and the lighting's the same and the colours are always the same. They've got their branding behind them. And then it's the same process, really. But the beauty of our studio is they should literally be able to, the only thing they need to do is book their guests, because in my opinion, podcasts really do need to be at least a two-way conversation. I don't personally love podcasts where it's just one person talking.
They're unsustainable anyway, because if you're the only person talking, I mean, I've only ever done one podcast where it's just me telling our entire marketing history, telling people about how I started off in marketing, and it was not just draining, but it was exhausting. Like also the amount of prep that needed to go into it. Yeah. Whereas I think like when you got two people in a room, the content just generates itself. Really, the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as they've got enough in common. So I found that's worked. Plus, also you're leveraging the other person's audience.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean that's the main power of it, and then obviously it can get split into, as you said earlier, all the snippets. Yeah. That's the power. Yes, you might have a 30-minute, 60-minute episode, but even if that only gets a few...
That's a subtle hint to get us to get the episode lengths down.
Well, yeah, they're up there. I think there was a stat, I don't know exactly the exact number, it was around the 40-ish minute mark that supposedly is optimal. Yeah. Although it's like social media, that's an ever-changing thing.
Do you think some people look at the total length of an episode and be like, that's an hour and 20, I'm not even going to start watching it?
I'm pretty certain that probably is the case.
And for a lot of people, maybe, yeah.
It goes two ways, because for me, I do quite a lot of driving because we sort of film all over the country, and often the shoot might be 2 hours away. So in that instance, if I landed on a 2-hour podcast, I'd be like, perfect. That's my journey sorted.
Yeah.
However, if I was sat at home, there's not a chance I would sit and watch a 2-hour episode. I'll take the dog out every morning, or the dog's out every morning for about 30 to 40 minutes. And most of the podcasts I listen to will fill that time up. Yeah. And by the time I'm home, it's just wrapping up and it's done. So I think an hour is okay. I think when it starts to go over an hour, possibly not really helping much.
There is we're always I'm eager to keep things as efficient as possible, because obviously we got members of the team committed to it. It takes time to edit all that kind of stuff, so it's but then other instances, like I've had interviews with people and I'm like, you know what, someone's just been in business 40 years, how am I going to get them to condense that into like less than an hour?
Yeah, well, that's the battle, really.
Yeah, but then I guess maybe you can have parts, like, part 1, part 2.
Yeah. I mean, most our podcast packages, obviously they can be customized, but they're generally based on a 30 to 45 minute conversation. Just because I do feel that is probably optimal.
Yeah, I do understand.
But obviously we listen to them because we're there filming, and sometimes I do think, well, there's a lot more story there that is getting missed. So yeah, I see the battle.
It could be a case of splitting it down. I mean, we were talking about shifting this podcast to a fortnightly one anyway. Yeah. I guess I'm not exactly Stephen Bartlett, so podcasting's not what I do full time. Yeah. But we always do want to just get that efficiency. So I think for us, we probably will go to fortnightly at some point, just because and it also gives us a bit more opportunity to promote the content. Usually we're so busy just making the content that we forget that we don't have time to tell people it's there.
Exactly. Well, that's what I started to say and probably got sidetracked. The more important thing, in my opinion, is making the snippets. Because if you've got a 30-minute episode, you could certainly get 5 to 10 posts out of that, possibly even up to 20 posts. Yeah. If you really wanted to. Like one of our clients who's using our podcast service in the studio, when they're posting the full length episodes on YouTube, they're not getting huge numbers. They're getting sort of low hundreds of views, but that when they post a YouTube short, which is equivalent of Instagram Reels or TikTok, like up to 60 seconds, they're quite literally getting 2,000 plays. And why? Just because YouTube's pushing shorts, that's basically why.
Well, yeah, we're struggling with YouTube Shorts a bit. We're doing well on Instagram. Facebook's a bit fickle though, because I guess
I'm kind of done with Facebook altogether. I quite happily delete it, but there's only really one reason I haven't deleted it, and that's basically because you can't use Facebook Manager if you don't have an account.
Oh, which you use for Instagram, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I want to run paid ads, which I haven't done for a while, but I did used to run paid ads.
Did you find them useful? Or productive?
They need to be set up properly, and to be honest, I probably wasn't setting them up properly, because I've probably wasted hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, and haven't tracked whether it's worked or not. So that's really on me for...
We're just delving back into it as well, because we've worked with agencies in the past and we didn't get anywhere with paid ads, but part of the challenge is they're on a clock, and when the clock runs out, they drop the campaign regardless of if it's in the right place, and then you wait till the next month until you got enough time with them. But now we made the commitment, we're going to do our paid ads in-house. So we're going for the LinkedIn approach, but then we're going to use the other platforms for the retargeting. So then we benefit from, LinkedIn's being really specific with the target market, but then we can use the other platforms which are cheaper for that retargeting. So
exactly. I mean, TikTok's very cheap at the moment. You could argue if it's the right audience or not, but I think the audience on that is very rapidly becoming older.
But that's the thing.
I'm on there every day, whether I like it or not, because my brain is like, oh, see that app? You need to press that right now. And I'll lose a few minutes quite often throughout the day.
But I think that's the beauty of it. If you find the people on LinkedIn, then show them ads wherever they go, regardless of the platform. That's got to be the way. But you know what? As part of building that £1 million business, you've got to have some sort of reliable lead generation technique. Yeah. And some businesses might have a team of telemarketing people who'll be on the phone all day trying to generate some sort of lead into a funnel. But you can go down that route, or you can use the paid ads, and I don't know which one's better at the moment, but I think that is one thing that's missing from our business at the moment, just having that reliable tap you can turn on and off.
Well, I mean, if you're using it in the sense of driving traffic to the podcast specifically, then obviously eventually, once you've got enough paid traffic to the podcast, then it should organically start to snowball, hopefully.
I mean, our plan was to use it to drive traffic to our webinar. It's called What Is Your Business Really Worth?
Okay. But webinars are absolutely massive. It's not something I've tried myself, but I see them on a daily basis trying to sell me various courses in different things. And I do start to go through the process a lot of the time, and then I just realise, to be honest, I can't really be bothered to commit to it, or there's some hurdle. But I think there's a lot of people making a lot of either profit directly or just the fact you're building your brand by having a webinar. So
absolutely. I mean, I'm a slow learner, so I'll probably say that quite a few times, but my business coach, Amanda, she's mainly a sales and marketing coach, but she does do business elements, but she's been trying to get me to have a webinar for about 2 years, and I've dabbled in it, but we've never found the right one until now, in my opinion, because I've finally found an area where we're relatively niched. I can add a lot of value in 40 minutes. So we're just maintaining that, fortnightly at the moment. So, but you know what? It sounds like you're definitely onto something with the podcast service, because you're ticking the box of it being subscription based. Really, people pay you every single month. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. How did you? What made you think of it? Why do you want to go down this route?
Well, Again, I've got a coach myself, which I've been working.
Is that
Gary Crosby.
Crosby, yeah.
Yeah. So I've been working with him probably over 9 months now, and most of the coaching is around just kind of, you probably agree, it's getting the things that are in your head already, but getting them out there and then making sure you actually go through with it, like the accountability side of things. So it's definitely helped me. And that was one of the things, like I was feeling that the business had got stuck at a certain revenue amount and had been stuck there for quite a long time, much longer than I would like to be. And one of the ways to get past that naturally is to go down more of the subscription model, which historically, maybe say 3-4 years ago, was a lot more difficult because the need for content wasn't there the same way it is now. So it's just kind of happened that the actual requirement for content and my sort of thoughts to go down the subscription route kind of collided, and both it works.
You know what, I'd say the need for content has always been there. I think the awareness of the need.
Yeah, well, that's probably a fair point. The awareness and the value, like people value it enough to pay for it. So yeah, we obviously the podcasts, there's no point in doing a podcast if you're not going to stick at it, basically. So our retainer for the podcast is a 6-month minimum, ideally to 12 months, and then ideally to renew. So that obviously beneficial for us, but also beneficial to the client because it makes them stick at it, because there's no point starting a podcast, doing 4 episodes, seeing it's getting 20 views and then binning the whole idea, because there's no point of starting in the first place. So the idea is we keep the client pushing forward, and they will see the growth over time, because it always takes time. Any sort of content, it takes a long time to get traction. And yeah, for us, it's regular income on a monthly basis. In that instance, it's probably more a volume thing rather than because we're talking hundreds per month and we're not talking thousands. But once you start to get 10, 15 clients a month, all paying sort of between £4,000 to £1,000 a month, then obviously it starts to add up, and then you can scale the team. And that was the other thing I was working with my coach, is what is my end goal, or well, mid goal kind of thing, is do I want to grow a team? And that has always been a thing in my head, that I do want to grow a team. Not astronomical size, I'm only looking to sort of grow to, as in payroll, sort of 4 to 5 people probably.
Why do you want to grow a team?
Just because I feel that I do too much myself, and it affects my life from a personal point of view. I don't have a very interesting life generally in terms of out of work. Yes, we live a nice life in terms of we've got nice houses and cars and that kind of stuff. But in terms of actual having time to do stuff, I'm just always working, basically.
Is that traveling? Would you want to do more of that?
Holidays, maybe. I'm not one of these travelers, to be honest. I'm not one that wants to go, I don't know, to Thailand for 3 months. That actually generally doesn't interest me. Yeah. A lot of people, it does interest them, so it would apply to them. I don't want the business to be able to run itself, but if I don't want to work Fridays anymore, then I don't need to.
I guess that is kind of wanting to run itself in some ways, isn't it? Or
for a day a week, not all day every day. Yeah. Yes. I still like to be hands-on, and I'm enjoying more of the client management. If I could, my problem is I have to manage clients and do a large proportion of the work, and I have been doing that for sort of 10 years. Yeah. I don't mind doing one or the other, but doing both is just too much. And the older I get, I just can't see myself sustaining that for another 10 years.
I think one thing people don't realize is it's not always about the hours you work. It's about the burden of having two different roles at the same time.
Yeah.
Because even when you're not doing a particular role, your mindset it's still in your head.
Yeah.
So when you're wearing lots of different hats in business, I find it you burn out really quickly. And
Yeah.
I think that's always been one of my drivers. Like, not necessarily to have. I don't mind if the business doesn't run without me. I know that sounds kind of counter productive to what I normally say is, hey, get the business to run without you. But that's always a relative measure, right?
Yeah.
Like, no business will truly ever run without someone, because in the end of the day, you can get all the operations running without you, which I guess to some extent our business is. But you're there for that direction, you're there for that vision, and if it wasn't me, someone else would have to be there for that vision and direction.
Yeah.
And so it's never going to completely run without anyone in that sense. But I guess so, yeah. A lot of the things you're saying, they're the same reasons I really wanted to push the development of the business. But yeah. I've also found nurturing team members is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
It's a bit like nurturing your own kids in some ways, getting people, especially we were talking about apprentices earlier.
Yeah.
Taking apprentices who don't have really any experience, and then getting to the point where they're confident, they're productive, because they're not just productive for your business, they're productive members of society.
Well, again, yeah, I've literally just done that. Not to blow my own trumpet too much, but I had a phone call the other week, and it was a parent of a local lad, and she was like, can you offer any work experience, ideally paid, for my son who's 16 years old? And I was like thinking in my head, I'd really like to help you, but it's just going to be more of a hindrance to me. I'm already at capacity trying to help my other staff and run freelancers and that kind of thing. So I kind of said, I'm really sorry, but I just don't think I'm in a position to help. And then I hung up the phone, and then my brain started going, the same as yours probably would. And you're like, well, actually, there probably is something I could do. Obviously, because I've got my wedding business. One of the big things with weddings is you film for 10 hours of the day, and you've got 500 gigabytes worth of footage from different cameras. The first task is to cut up all of the usable clips from the day. So when you get to edit, everything's usable is just there waiting for you. And that's a task that anyone can do, that reasonably unskilled, other than you need to know how to use a software, but it's not hugely complicated to teach that. So yeah, I rang her back up, and I was like, you know what, get him to come in. And he's done maybe, I think, about 9 days in the last month or so.
Amazing.
Absolutely smashed it. Was culling, which that's what they call it, culling 2 weddings in a day. And I was like, yeah, you've definitely got something. And again, that person has got huge potential to develop in the future.
Is he going to stick around?
Well, who knows what the future brings, but whether it's for myself or someone else, I have helped them hopefully see that this is a career that they could follow. Because at 16, like I said earlier, I thought I was going to be a graphic designer at that age. A good job I didn't go down that route. Well, you never know, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So yeah, hopefully they'll keep doing stuff for me in the future, and it steered them in a career path.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a good deed for the next generation almost. I didn't get anything out of it, and I am paying them, but what I'm paying them for a 16-year-old, they're over the moon. But for me as a business, it's not a huge amount of money. So it's win-win.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'd see with Apprentice as well. Almost the same principle. And that's why I'd like to do it. Not because I'm trying to get cheap labour. I don't really care about that. It's more, I actually do want to help people as well.
That's pretty cool. I guess the subscription based thing, that's the start, isn't it? When you sign people up, that's when you got the confidence to then hire more people as well. because if you can rely on that income coming in. And then there was quite a good book by John Wardle called The Automatic Customer, and it's quite interesting because he talks about how subscription-based models can be applied to most industries. And I think there's a lot of industries out there, they'll just say subscriptions, no, not going to work, not for my industry. But then I guess that's a limiting belief. But then I'm sure there are industries where it can be very hard to do it.
Yeah. I feel fortunate that I think it's become probably easier in my specific industry. But like you say, there's probably not many industries you couldn't do it to some degree. Even in mine, there's loads of ways that you can monetize that I don't, just because it probably isn't the best use of my time. But if you're maybe just starting out, or you don't have many overheads, there's lots of other ways you could do it even in my industry. Such as people just go out and film stock footage and selling what they call LUTs, which is basically pre-made, a bit like Instagram filters where you press the button and it changes the colours and it looks nicer. People sell those for video, and they sell them at only $30, $40 a go. But if they've grown a YouTube following and they sell 1,000 of those packs at $30, $40 each, that's a pretty nice amount of money.
Definitely, yeah.
So there's lots of ways, and I'm sure that could apply to
accounting, I guess, or other industries even.
You maybe look for a small ticket item that people are more likely to buy. If you do run ads, they're more likely to convert because people will spend £30. They probably won't spend £500 to sign up to a course quite so easy.
Yeah, I mean, for us, accounting's always been one of those industries where it's lent pretty well to subscription-based models. Although there's still accountants out there, like, invoicing on completion, but it's just madness because, but it's one of those industries. But I think the real push for the accounting industry for us is what we call leveraged advisory. So it's about being able to help lots of people in one go, or it's about being able to create content that helps people. So because for the accounting industry, actually we've got a restriction in available personnel. Like, you've got the baby boomers who are propping up the industry and they're retiring or have started to retire, and then COVID, a lot of them were just like, screw this, we're not messing with COVID and all the government changes and all that kind of stuff. And then you got Making Tax Digital, and a lot of them like, oh, screw this, we're not messing with Making Tax Digital. And they just took early retirement. So there's just this big vacuum that's opening up in the accounting industry, and like a lot of the successful firms, or the firms that are on track to be successful, they're saying, look, whatever we do, we can't rely on having people in the business to make money. I'm not saying you do have to have a team, you've got to have good people, and luckily, well, it's not luckily, but for us, because we really focused on advisory, it means we're a really good place for accountants to get experience. So we've never really had a problem recruiting. But it's the advisory element. If you want, you've got it. And leveraged advisory, especially, that's where the money is now. Help more people by using resources rather than people. And that's really cool. So you mentioned something, and I think something I'm trying to figure out about you, but you can confirm it now.
Okay.
So I guess your mentor is really your father, isn't? And would you say, and then your coach is Gary. So they're not the same. Your mentor and coach aren't the same people, are they?
No, no, Gary's not my dad, if that's what you mean.
No.
So I guess my dad, deep down, long term, I should say, has been my coach to some degree. Maybe wouldn't call it a coach, but as long as that I can remember, I mean, he has supported me a lot. Like right now, he doesn't really know too much of the ins and outs of the business, but if I ever need any advice or just to ask a question about whatever, then I know that I could ask it. And right now, obviously, I've gone into the transition of actually employing people where we do. I mean, we've always had an office, but I'd say part of my coaching was to set up a proper office and have a place where people come in to work. which I've always had to some degree. Obviously, COVID changed that whole way, but I've come back to having an office space. But what my dad's saying now basically is if I want him to come into the office and kind of act as more of a, I guess, like a manager type role, and as a third party outsider, he can assist me by maybe seeing what we're doing wrong, because I'm not a natural manager. No one teaches you this stuff. Maybe advise that, am I doing anything wrong? Or maybe maybe I'm too soft to say, to tell someone off, for example, if I wanted to do that, if that's
yeah, it's always handy having like an external person come in and really sort of critique your leadership style. Yeah. I guess to be successful in business, you got to be able to take that criticism. Or constructive criticism.
That's the main issue, though, because when it comes from someone that's very close to you, it's like obviously either my wife or my dad. I do find it incredibly hard to hear someone sort of tell me if I'm doing something wrong, because it just feels like a personal attack. Whereas if it was, I think that's where a third party coach does help, because that person doesn't know me in any other regards. So in my brain, I don't take it the same way.
Yeah. You made a lot of progress in the last year though, really, because you're opening up the studio, hiring your team.
Well, that's what I've been working with the coach really to do. Is now, where have we got to now? It's now assessing what's the next direction. Where do you want to go from here? I've kind of reached my short-term goals from that side of things. Yeah. What I'm struggling with now is obviously my time management, managing team, whilst still trying to, like, not many people know about the podcasting. Yeah. And I'm not helping myself because I've got my head down every day doing the actual work that pays the bills still. So I'm not shouting about all of these services that we offer. So how can I expect all these clients to be knocking on the door saying, yeah, we want to sign up to your retainer, when I'm not telling anyone that it's even there? That's the problem I'm at the minute.
To be fair, no one's going to be able to do that straight away once they've launched something. It takes time. Like one of the hardest bits for our business, because we did a pretty substantial pivot when we were about 7.5 years in. So we launched the Apex program about 2 years ago, and it was just trying to find the right marketing formula for it. Like, you come along and say to me, hey, I want you to get more accounting clients and do more tax work. We know how to do that. We know the Google ads to run. We know where to network. Yeah. We know the message we need to get across. But when we started the Apex program, all I knew is people needed it because I needed it. It's based on the solution I used to grow my own business. And all I did was package it up and tidy it up and make it available. So there was that demand, but we were just trying to understand where the customer avatar, at first I was just like, that's easy, it's me. And then, but really to understand the language that we had to use, the things we need to write about, the places we needed to use it. Yeah. That's taken so long. We've come across great marketing people who have helped us. We've been let down by marketing people. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't always a case about just having the knowledge. It was about working with the right people and finding them. And it's a good 2-year journey, just like from creating a signature solution, the early aspects of it. Because at the moment, you've got a handful of podcasts clients, really, haven't you? And you're learning stuff from them all the time about what works, what doesn't. So you're in this constant process of refining your signature solution, but at the same time, you've got to find the momentum to market it, and you've got to find the energy and resources within your business to market it. But I don't think that's unusual for someone pivoting in the way you are.
Yeah. I mean, I know exactly what I'm trying to sell. One of them being the podcast, and the other one just being a general content retainer, where again you batch film content, and then every month they've got X amount of content to post online. And again, it's the same subscription model. You need to be posting every month, or at least across a month, but for a long period of time before you can see the traction. So again, it's the same applies for that. So we would come in and film video clips and photography assets, and then they're delivered a library of assets that they can publicize themselves across social, or obviously if they've got a social media agency, they can give it to them, or naturally, most likely, we will start to distribute the content ourselves in-house as well, like we'd already do with the podcast, because that's one thing I probably didn't explain. The client comes in with their guests, they record the whole episode, they walk into the room, all the cameras already set up, they just sit down, they do what we're doing now, they have a chat, they leave, everything else is done for them. Same with what we do for you. We upload it to YouTube, we upload it to Spotify. We've got a way where the Spotify actually has the video playing as well.
Oh, amazing.
Obviously it goes to any major platform you want, because it just gets fed through like a
is that Buzzsprout?
Like that kind of thing. It goes through a feed that distributes it out to any of the platforms you want it to, and it basically, similar to the Google, it kind of crawls to see if there's anything new, and then it pulls it through automatically. So we publicize it to YouTube and to that distribution platform. Then that's how they could get released basically instantly.
Yeah. I mean,
but we do all of that for the client. We agree the day it gets released, and that's it. Even some clients want to design their own thumbnails. Others, we design the thumbnails for them. Same with the branding. If they just have come to us, they don't even know what they want to call the podcast. In theory, we can have a session where we work out a name, we get the logo designed, we design the thumbnails. So it's kind of a full solution. And that would be a similar process. If they wanted to come on board for content, we have a brainstorming session for what content we can create, and we agree how many times across a month or a quarter we come in to capture the content, and then they're just delivered it as an asset library to distribute, or again, possibly in the not so distant future, we'll probably distribute that themselves, because I think that's probably what we're missing at the moment. I've got loads of partners that can do that for us, but whether that needs to come in-house, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the question is, like, how well do your partners align to your culture as a business? Yeah, and we've had thoughts about this as well, because there's certain things. I mean, we expect our team to stick to our culture, but actually, I think anyone in our supply chain should really be quite closely aligned, because we've seen instances where if they weren't, it did impact the client, and we can only let that happen once.
Exactly.
That's really cool though, but. And also, I think like the other thing I really wanted to ask is, what's like the best project you've ever worked on? Like that one thing, that one video you look at and you're still like, wow, I did this.
That's a tricky one, because the one thing we haven't done so far is really niche down. So we do, although you could say business to business is a niche, I wouldn't really say it is. So we've done, I really am into sort of cars, automotive, that kind of thing. That's a direction I'd really like to go into. The closest thing we've done to that, we did about 3 years back to back, where we filmed for the BY's British Superbike team.
Okay.
So we just did like a season launch video where we'd go to whatever racetrack the first race of the year is at. We film the riders who, I mean, I'm not personally into motorbikes, but a lot of people, like my wife's dad, he's massively into that. So the people we were interviewing were like big celebrities to him. I personally didn't really know them. So I wasn't kind of fanboying over
starstruck
them or anything. But that was quite a cool one, because we interviewed the riders, filmed the bikes going around the track. We got the media passes to go behind the barriers, where no one else can get to.
Oh, amazing.
That was quite cool. We've done a lot of projects that I've enjoyed. They're not necessarily the most sexy of projects, because corporate world isn't always that sexy. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends how you look at it, the companies that want to pay proper money, they're not always the most interesting of businesses. But that's just the nature of it. Our task is to make what maybe isn't that sexy of a business as sexy as it can be, or come up with creative ideas.
I guess as a generalization, I always notice like some of the more, well, I understand anyone working in these industries will probably find them quite exciting, but sometimes the really profitable businesses aren't always the most glamorous.
No.
Because a lot of the time generating good quality profits is just about being steady and reliable. And whereas like the really like sort of like entertainment based businesses and stuff, they can be less steady sometimes. But
I mean, we've done a lot of stuff. We kind of work with, because the business used to be based in Thrapston, which is Northamptonshire, which is close to Kettering. That's probably the town that most people would know. So we've done we still work with them now. Cransley Hospice. They're a hospice in the Kettering area. Obviously, they're charity funded. So we try our best to support them by filming really heartwarming like stories of people who have lost loved ones. That's the sort of job that it doesn't pay loads of money, but the reward is from elsewhere, just creating something that's really nice and personal. So there's that side of things. And yeah, we've done a few brand things. We worked with a brand who was on Dragon's Den recently, so that was quite cool.
Oh, amazing.
And we had models, and we rented like a big fancy house.
Did they get the funding?
They didn't. Probably. You'd have to watch the episode.
I will do. Yeah.
It was a bit of a tricky one. I think they got a bit of a grilling. But I have heard the exposure they get off the back of Dragon's Den was pretty. They got the rewards afterwards, right?
Yeah, there's loads of businesses that go on Dragon's Den where they're perfectly viable businesses, but they don't get the funding.
Yeah, a lot of people go on there, no question, just for the exposure. Yeah, they don't have any. They didn't go in there to get funding in the first place, really.
No, I can imagine that. And so, Chris, you mentioned earlier that you don't want a huge team, but you do want to get the business to a point where it's semi independent from you, so you can enjoy things in your personal life a bit more. You've already started growing the team. Like, who would you say is your next hire? I mean, not in terms of name, but like in terms of position. What are you looking to bring into the business next in terms of team members?
I'm not fully sure because I haven't got that far, but it would, in my head at the moment, it would either be like a social media account manager,
okay,
or even potentially just an office manager.
Is that, and like a social media person, is that for your own business or to support your clients directly?
Well, it would be both. Okay. And that was the beauty of, again, it's not my first hire ever, but my current hire of Liam is, the idea was he spends a proportion of his time creating content for Eldraw as the business, as well as alleviating a lot of my workload as well.
Do you find he has time for that at the moment, or
we're getting there?
Yeah,
but we're both almost at capacity again. So I do have a third person, Jack, who's worked with me for probably 7 years, almost from day one, to be honest. But he's always worked freelance, but I'd very much class him as a member of the team.
Yeah.
He's just not on payroll. He does his own stuff, but a lot of his work does come from us.
Yeah, that's fair enough, and that's quite common in a lot of businesses, especially at the scale-up stage.
Especially our industry too. But yeah, the social media manager in my head primarily would be what I touched on earlier, making sure the content is distributed correctly, because that is a massive stumbling block. Less so now, but a few years back, we'd deliver a big corporate video, which were all the rage. That's all people had, was corporate videos for your website.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't get utilized properly. Like, they just missed the trick, kind of thing. So if we just said, look, let's do all of that for you and maximize it, then that makes sense to me.
You know what? It's amazing that you're doing that, because one of the things I see is there's people out there in terms of suppliers, and they're very eager to get a job done, but the key thing is getting the job done doesn't really matter. It's about making sure your client gets a result from the job.
Yeah.
And I think there's still quite a lot of people in many industries that still don't recognize that. It's not a tick box exercise. If you've got the skill set to make sure the client gets value out of what you did, but they don't, the fact that you delivered on a contract is not good enough, because they might say, okay, fine, you did what you agreed to and we'll pay you, but it's not going to build that long-term relationship where they keep coming back, and it's not going to create that long-term value. And
we need to be able to, we can already to some degree, but we can't track the return on investment if we're not in charge of the distribution, because they might be letting down the team in their back end. So that's not really on us. Whereas if they trusted us to do the whole thing, it's completely on us, and we should be able to get a much better result and be able to track return on investment, even just by using, even on, if you were running Facebook ads, you could say you spent X amount on a campaign, you spent X amount on ad spend, and what's come back is X. Is it profitable or not? And then next time round, you tweak the content until you get a formula that works. Again, to do that, you need a much larger team and really to charge more money. So it's that kind of chicken and egg. How do you get to that point? I have loads of contacts that could do it on a freelance basis, but probably the next step, as I said, would be to bring that fully in-house.
Well, when we launched the Apex program, we had about 190 clients or 185 clients, and to be fair, even after I did this, we were still incredibly competitive in terms of pricing and our service, but we pretty much put through an average price increase of about 65%. And we went from about 185 clients to about 125. But we're making more profit. And that's how I freed up our time to then go and really focus on growing the Apex program. But not just the Apex program. We wanted to give something back to the existing clients that were there as well. So we started holding events. We started spending more time talking to them and supporting them with their own growth challenges. So it wasn't just about getting one side of the business to fund another. That's not what we're doing at all. It was more about, we realized people needed more support than we could possibly give them at the price point they had, and we had to do something that was actually really unpopular. But then it put us in the right place. And I come across a lot of people who are stuck in a position where, like, they know what they need to do in terms of workload, they don't have the team members to do it, or they can't afford to get more team members. So the only balancing solution there is to actually increase pricing and then free up capacity through the losses you get because of that. But it's always a tough thing to do.
It's tricky to do that though, because it's hard to lose clients, even if it's for the better. You just probably don't want to, but
you can't become very personally entwined with them. If you're a good business owner, which I know you are, you'll have be personally invested into each of their success stories. And sometimes, being able to disengage from that, it is very, very difficult. Some business owners out there that they don't have that problem at all. Hey, business is business. But
if you've got a more ruthless personality, I think we're both more on the softer side, a lot more personable, a lot more caring, probably.
I think ruthless,
which it's good and bad.
The ruthless people, they tend, I don't know if they tend to be that successful, but if they understand, when you take something, you have to give something, then it works. And if someone's fully aware of how they're going to give something back, then fair enough. Oh, so Chris, what would you say the biggest challenge is right now? Is that pretty much what you just described? Like, finding the capacity to really do the work needed to scale up to the next level?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest challenge is pretty much making sure that I'm spending the time on the right things. I know I'm not spending enough time currently on promotion, and that was the point of me employing someone, but I haven't still managed to do that. I mean, I'm only kind of not even 4 months in, so it's probably still early days to expect that. But yeah, if I can free up enough of my time that I can do what I know I need to do, then I think we can go up to the next step. So yeah, I know what I need to do. It's just making sure it happens, basically.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. If someone wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
So you either connect with me on LinkedIn, Chris Wardle, be under there as videographer for Eldraw Creative Media, or our website is Eldraw, which is eldraw.co.uk. Or drop me an email at chris@eldraw.co.uk.
Amazing. And thank you so much for joining us. So everyone, you've been watching the Unrelenting Drive podcast. Stay tuned for future episodes, and thanks for joining us.